Hey there. Thank you so much for waiting for us. We had a few slight technical issues getting this up and running, but we are here now and we are ready to answer your questions. We've come together. I've got Chris Maltbie from Spartan, VP of Global Product, Steve Hammond, and then I've got two athletes with me, Nicole Miracle, who's a pro, and Kevin Donoghue, who is a very avid age group racer. So we are going to be talking tonight about the Spartan changes for Sport 2024, which is introducing a competitive wave. And rather than me try and explain it, let's go straight to Chris. And Chris, can you tell us a bit about this development?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were looking ahead of 2024 and sort of the sport of obstacle course racing through the lens of Spartan. News is out now that, we're on track for the Olympics. And so we're looking at ways to continue to support the sport on the whole. And when we were looking at sort of the data we had on elite racing and age group racing, we saw some really interesting trends. The sport's getting hotter, and at the same time, those categories were tapering off in registration, and we recognized an opportunity. When we looked at the results as well, we saw that, the times for top age groupers and a lot of our elite racers were actually starting to converge. And we saw an opportunity to open up the sport, to make it easier for newcomers to come to the sport, to make it so that top age group athletes have the ability to, rise up through the ranks, and just make it more exciting by having one big competitive leaderboard for the weekend. So what that means for next year is that on our regular season weekend, so anything that's not a series or a championship race, we'll be having a competitive group instead of separate age group and elite. The way the leaderboard works for that is that your top three male and female racers at each race will be your overall podium winners. And then everyone below the top three will be sorted into their age groups. So that means anyone can come in new to the sport, sign up competitive, they can race, they could fly right to the top. They don't need to pre-select or pre-register into one or the others. We think it'll have a pretty nice impact to help the sport continue to grow.
You said races that aren't series races. What does that mean?
That's correct. So the other change we're making for sport next year is a simplified progression of championships. So we'll be mirroring what more sports do, where basically you have a regular season, a postseason, and then, final championship races. So we've got our regular season events. Those are the normal event weekends you'd sign up for. You'd go out and you'd run Saturday or Sunday in a competitive heat. Then we'll have national series races. And in the vast majority of countries, that'll be a 3-race series. And that'll be a sprint, a super, and a beast for the formats. So we're really looking to make sure that athletes of different specialties could have the opportunity to flourish across that. If you're a short distance person, maybe you don't excel at the beast, there's an opportunity there, and vice versa. Those will progress into a regional championship. So all of your national series within one region will flow into the regional championship. So for example, the North American Championship will encapsulate people who have progressed through the Canadian National Series, the U.S. National Series, and the Mexican National Series. We'll also be having regional championships in Europe. We'll be regional championships in APAC. And then from that level, it'll progress on to World Championships, where, again, next year we'll have a range of championship events, both overtly Spartan branded. So, the Beast Championship, we'll have a short distance championship. We have ultra championships, and then we have our brand adjacent championships. So OCR WC, World's Toughest Mudder are also world championship level events. At each of those tiers, so starting at national series and on the way up, we'll basically run a pro championship that people have qualified into through their performance at the previous level, and then an age group championship that any age group can register into. And those will operate a little bit more like we did in 2023, where age groupers will be sorted by their age bracket and sent off. And anyone that's qualified into that pro championship will also begin racing together at the same time, so we can judge them by gun time. First person across the line is the winner. More exciting, easier to track.
So let me sorry if I've misunderstood. This change that's coming in, it's not happening to every single event next year.
Yep, it'll just be our regular season events. So that is the majority of our events, to be sure. But that won't apply to national series, regional championships, or world championship events.
I think that's going to go, because obviously there's been a lot of questions, people asking things. That's going to go a long way to one of the questions that we had about elite and age groupers and podiums. But before we get into those questions, welcome to everyone else. Now we've just touched on that. Thank you for explaining that, Chris. You say it's simple. it is simple. I love the simplification of what has been happening the last few years. It does still sound complex, but it's just a lot of information. So hopefully we can kind of root through it and work out exactly what it means for everyone. To the rest of you, welcome. Please bring in your questions. Steve, I guess you'll be answering a lot of them as well. And thanks so much, Nicole and Kevin, for joining us as part of the athlete contingent. You guys are out there running and kind of are the ones taking part in the sport and know what's going on out there and have the good opinions. So I think let's start with kind of opening the floor up to you guys before we go to the questions from anyone else and anything that you wanted to ask.
Why are we, Nicole? I'll just give you the floor first.
Okay, for questions for that. I don't know if I have any specific questions about the new format because I've been introduced to it. I think I understand it pretty well. I guess my comment on it would be that I think it's going to be exciting to go to races next year and line up against, you know, everyone else who is running my same pace regardless of their age or gender. And so that's going to be pretty exciting to just be able to have a bigger mass start. I know it's not a complete mass start. There are waves to it, but it'll be cool to run in a different like variety of heats.
Yeah, I can definitely.
Nicole, I've got.
What's up?
Nicole, I've got a question for you in regarding this kind of like new change, and you know, you're obviously a massive advocate for women's sports, and you know, this change we had in mind. You know, the kind of intimidation factor for some people kind of getting into the sport and excelling has been a little bit challenging in the past. And one of our goals is to kind of break down those barriers. What's your thoughts on the new change and especially encouraging new women into the sport?
Yeah, so as a newcomer coming in, what the athletes will be able to do is register for that competitive wave, so they can immediately step into that level of competition. And then my understanding is that they will select what pace they think they are. So they by their 5K time, if they don't have an existing obstacle racing time, and so then they'll be able to immediately race against the people that they should be in the same level with, which means that you don't have to race age group before going to elite, for instance, or in general, what we've seen happen before are we have like the men's wave go off and then we have the women's wave go off, and the women have to pass a lot of men if you're one of those top women. And so this, again, it takes that into account. And so you're going to be starting off with people, again, your similar pace, no matter if they're older than you. So you really shouldn't be having to change positions too much and pass, 100 people. So I think those two reasons are going to make it much easier for women to race in general and for women to get into the sport.
Awesome.
I would like to comment on that as well, if I may, because this is something that has been, as someone who raced in the UK at a very low level, but still liked to race elite, and I was never podiuming, I was quite unhappy with the changes that happened when it went from just being one big elite category into pro and age group. And there was a point where I could have just turned up to a race and podiumed, and not because I'm good. And then when I did race, they were such small categories, and I think that impacted women's participation a lot because it feels intimidating standing up next to just a few people, and if you're the one who's left at the back, it feels awful. And it's just something about the psychology of women to not want to really take that risk necessarily. A lot of the women in OCR are really strong and really pushing themselves forward, but I'm talking about the overall general psychology. So I think this one big wave feels a lot safer somehow. And I know there have been comments from people, and this is something we'll get into, about how now all of a sudden where they had the opportunity to podium an age group, they no longer do. I know for me, certainly, in the UK, my age group podium is now taken up with people that sometimes podium elite. But hey ho, I just have to get better if I want a podium. That's kind of the whole point of competition. But it actually almost encourages me to take part more, because it somehow feels more welcoming and safer. And that sounds crazy for the kind of sport it is. But I think in terms of getting women involved in the sport, it is a fantastic move. And I'm so happy about it. And I love that instead of just being elite podiums as it used to be, it's now elite and age group. So it gives everyone the chance. It's like the combination of the two. I think it's such a great development.
Yeah, and you don't have to choose. I know there's a lot of issues there with, especially on the women's side, but I think on the men's as well. With athletes deciding, do I want to run age group and do well and maybe podium, or is it time to step up to elite? And how do I actually contend with those athletes as well? Where do I fall in against them? And so now you get to see exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We did.
Well, you know what?
I think
Steve, I'm going to step in there. Piggybacking off Nicole just said, I was one of those athletes for years where when they made the change in 2018, I had to, I was 43 years old. I had to make that choice. Do I continue to run elite? Do I continue to run age group? Now I don't have to make that choice anymore. But during that period of time, when they first started the age group, it was much smaller waves, and the elite was still a pretty big wave. And then over time, the strength of the age groupers and the level of competition just kept growing and growing, to where the elite wave was smaller, and now these age group waves have gotten monstrous. And then it became a real situation like, do I choose elite? Do I choose age group? I don't know where to go. I decided to choose a lane immediately and stay in age group for the long haul. But then a lot of other people really struggled with that and actually received a lot of, there was a lot of negative banter going back and forth about people getting heckled on podiums. I was one of them. So now, without having that choice, and to Nicole's point, putting everybody together, where you have these giant waves again, bringing back the nostalgia and the energy of the 2013s through 17, where we're all together, all able to compete. But now those age groupers still have that opportunity to stand out and run faster times. Because when you're not having to run through the clutter of a slower age group in front of you, and you're being pulled along, and you're forced to actually do better because you're with better people now. Because now the elite wave, right? Those pros that have been there forever, they're setting a faster pace, and that just brings everybody behind them along a lot faster now. So I think people's times are going to get better. I think the competitive spirit's going to get better. The energy is going to be better, and people don't have to make those choices anymore. And we get to capitalize on the strength that was the age group as it was the last couple of years, along with the glory days of 13, 14, and 15, and bringing it all together now. I really like the health of where this is going.
Yeah, and I think from when we look at Spartan brand, the way we started to think about it was, go back to ancient Sparta, it's a meritocracy, right? The strongest rose to the top, and we felt like it was a really good fit. The fastest racer should win, and it shouldn't be predicated on what you chose in advance or how fast you thought you would run or if you were nervous or not. We really think getting people out there shoulder to shoulder and just lay it all on the line. If you've got it, take it, is a good way to get people really engaged in the sport. And there, you can look back through the years of OCR, not just Spartan, but these dark horse stories in the early days of someone just showing up and maybe not even knowing how good they were, going on to have an amazing career in the sport. And that's where we think the future of it really is. As we get into the Olympics and we continue to promote Spartan World Championship events and everything else, you want anyone to show up.
Well, you're looking at one of them right there. She's sitting in the middle. That was Nicole. That was Matt Novakovic. That was Robert Killian, right? If you were there in 2016 at Pennsylvania and with Novakovic in 2013 beating Hobie Call for the first time in a Spartan race, came out of nowhere from Alaska. So those are all great points, and we're littered with those athletes all throughout our Spartan history.
Yeah. I think we are bringing it back, and I know me and Kevin were talking about it earlier. But one thing, real positive of this change is it's kind of bringing it back to when we had a real buzz in that start corral, in that first start corral, when we had 300 people all packed in there, and that buzz and that energy has definitely been missing from Spartan. And I think this is one change that could actually help bring that back, really bring back that kind of that real oomph of that start line feelings. That could be very, very exciting. And having these pace groups kind of split up does make the user experience a little bit more friendly, as Kevin was talking about, and Nicole, of able to run in your pace. And I know there's going to be some teething problems having a new format being laid out, but I think it will. I think it will organically figure itself out and kind of work. And after a couple of races, people will kind of know where they're going to, where they're going to kind of like slip into. And if they do that, they will have a better user experience. If you're too far forward, then you're going to get blown up easily and then just pass, which is not a great user experience. However, if you run with everybody and then know exactly where you're at, that's great. So I think that's one super positive thing that's going to come from this change.
I think that's
a really.
Oh, I was just going to say, for anyone for the uninitiated, we've kind of danced around and we've talked a little bit about the way the start waves will work next year. But to just define for anyone who's not up to speed on it, again, for these regular season events, instead of segmenting by first sending off an elite group and then waiting, and then 15 minutes later sending off batches of age groupers with their bracket, the way it'll work for next year at regular season events again is they'll be slotted during the registration process. You'll select your estimated finish time or estimated pace. And so everyone will be slotted into one of 5 pace groups that's racing competitive. So just like a marathon start corral, you'll have pace group 1, followed by pace group 2, 3, 4, on down. And then within those pace groups, we'll be sending off small batches of runners, sort of if you ever raced a stadion event, the way we do, where we step up a certain number of racers to the line, send them off, and then quickly thereafter, we send another batch. And we're going with that setup for a couple of reasons. One, it processes more people through the start line at once. 2, it lets us get all those competitive racers in the same corral, the same way we were talking about going back in the day when you had a packed start corral. You have everyone there, and that energy and that a nervous energy you get at a great start line. And then it's great for the course flow. So if your fastest racers go off first, they should never get caught by your second fastest, and so on. So when you have single track trails, when you have obstacles early in the course that can sometimes get backups, this creates a natural buffer in there. So you don't have the cascading effect where you start to get small backups become big backups as you go through the course. The last little twist on that is there's the pace groups, the 5 pace groups you select through the registration process. Anyone who podiums in the competitive category over the course of the year will be getting what's called a pro band. It's an armband, sort of like a soccer captain. And that'll get you priority access to the very front of the start line. So if you've basically gone out and proven that you're a top contender, you get a little bump to the front to make sure you have that first access, similar to the way you would if you registered elite this year. But instead of it being determined by what category you register on, it's going to be determined by performance, which we think again just makes it flow better, and it's more of an earned perk rather than something that you sign up for in advance.
I was going to ask that question actually, because when you're saying about people will select their finish times, will there come a point if people are selecting finish times that they're not necessarily fulfilling? Will they still be able to select those finish times? Will people be pushed forward if they're constantly underestimating themselves? Is that going to be?
So in particular, people overestimating their start times are something we'll be looking out for, right? So in our timing system, it's pretty easy to set up a flag that says so-and-so said they were going to run this pace and they didn't. Now, things always happen in races. So we would more be looking for patterns of people repeatedly, overestimating their pace. If someone wants to, if someone overperforms, we're less likely to flag them for that. There's less of an advantage going to the back of the pack anyway. So, if that performance, will probably be less likely to flag. But for sure, over the course of the year, if people are repeatedly lying just to get out a little bit sooner, we'll flag them, and then we can reassign them at the point of registration. So when they come in, when you register for the race at check-in, you get a wristband with your time. We can just bump you down a couple pace groups if you've been overestimating and underperforming.
I think, Steve, what you said about the start line, it's so true. Anyone who raced kind of, as Kevin, you said, 13, 14, 15, has that memory, even in the UK or Europe where races were a lot smaller, of that really packed corral. And it is an experience. It's a sporting event, but it is a whole life experience. And especially if it's your first time, that moment where whoever it is on the start line with a microphone, and it's just so exciting, and having everyone surrounding you and you're all you're in it together, is such a huge aspect of the sport. To bring that back for the people who are competing at the top is so fantastic, and it's just going to elevate the experience for everyone. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think really over the last couple of years, inadvertently, we've created this segregation between not only just the groups of age groups, and there's been many positives out of that, but it definitely segregated the elite community from the age group community, and then kind of diced up in between with the age group community. And now it's almost like we're desegregating, right? We're bringing everybody back together. So not only do you have that energy at the start line, but you have that camaraderie that goes along with it, that exceeds and kind of goes into the venue area afterwards. It goes into the social media platforms everywhere. So there's going to be a camaraderie that's going to be brought back as well, that carries into the podium ceremony. And I just think it makes the entire community come together a lot more, as opposed to being somewhat, I wouldn't say in a bad way, but being somewhat divided over the past 6 or 7 years.
I would add to it, Kevin, too. I think a side benefit, and it wasn't the leading cause for the change, but one thing that's come back to us via positive feedback is, if you have a friend that you have, a frenemy, a rival, whatever you like to race with, right now there's, at some point you're going to be different ages. You'll get bumped out. You won't be able to race together. We have some racers that like to race competitively with their child and their similar ability levels. Instead of being forced apart on course, anyone that runs similar, is a similar level, similar ability level, can go on the start line together, get out there and push each other further as they go, which I think is a nice side benefit of the change.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to kind of bring it back a little bit to address some of the concerns that have been said. The fear of like not being on the podium, or the fear of like losing out on their age group because of elite racers. Now in regular season events, and I would love a proper Jack Bauer stat from this, but I think you'll find, and just kind of looking at a lot of results, is that there is not a massive difference between some of the faster age groups and some of the sort of kind of like slightly slower elites. You'll find across the board that some of the age group athletes have almost been at podium level or in and around that kind of time. And I think you'll find that people who have been podium on a regular basis in age group will continue to actually do that in this, because the start corrals have only been very, quite slim, especially on the women's field, unfortunately, and that's why we're addressing this. But on the men's field, it's not massive. And then that's why, when it really counts, the championship races, where your age group really counts, to claim that US national series, then you will be in your age group or you will be in elite. And that's why we've, made it apart for those championship races. But I think you'll find that there won't be a massive difference, maybe 1 or 2 places. But I mean, that's from my point of view. I love to think what you guys think, Kevin especially, but Kevin and Nicole.
Yeah, I'd say, when you say 1 or 2 places, and that's over the course of all the age group combined, right? So I agree with that assessment 100%. It's not going to be that much of a difference. But I think what the biggest difference is the age groupers' times now are going to be faster, because now they're all being pulled along during the race with faster people with less traffic, especially during those stadions. I also think it adds more prestige and a greater level of importance to the weight of an age group podium now. Because it's maybe just a little bit tougher, maybe just a little bit. And I think that when you're getting pulled along by everybody, the times are going to have more integrity, because you're not saying, oh man, you know what, if I wasn't stepping over, 30 other people or going around them during the race, my time might have been 90 seconds faster. I could have been sitting on an overall podium. I've heard that conversation in every single race I've ever been to since 2018. And you're not going to really have that anymore. So it adds more integrity. I think it adds more weight and importance. And I don't, like you said, I don't think there's going to be much of a difference with somebody missing out on a podium because of the format. I mean, there's going to be those random times it happens. But again, hey, if you want to compete, go out there, get better, compete harder. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult in certain ways, but it's going to make it a lot cooler when you do hit that podium.
So there was somebody in the UK pulled some data together having this conversation, which was kind of interesting. Only a tiny amount, but just to give it to you. This was from the British Championships, I think. So I'm guessing that wouldn't have been included because that was a championship race. And the only place where it made a huge amount of difference in terms of the podium would be for the women age group 35 to 39. But what we were looking actually there at is the top three between the third place athlete and who would podium first in 35 to 39. There was 1 second difference between first and third in that age group. There was 10 minutes difference. So that athlete who actually came fourth there, she normally podiums first. It's unusual that she was there, but there's still plenty of time to be getting in, and that's purely because women 35 to 39 is kind of the busiest age group there. Same with the men, kind of 35 to 45. Improve the competition, but there is space for people to still do it.
Yeah, just to hop in one more time, I've been doing the age group power rankings for the entire year here in the United States. The number one age group, the fastest ones, were the men and the women at 35 to 39, followed by the 40 to 44. So I think that, and UK is probably one of the biggest Spartan markets other than the US and the world. So it's safe to say that that's where that trend is, right? That 35 to 39 is probably really affected most globally.
I just know that
there's
Steve
a comment here just by Jack.
For a long time, and now we can.
Sorry, Nicole?
Oh, I just know that Steve and I have been wanting to race each other for a long time, and now we can.
You're on. I better start training, Nicole. I did just race in Mexico, which was awesome. So that was good. But I will need to step my game up a bit if we're racing. I'll be excited. But go ahead, Fran. I think Bauer has commented, so I'll be interested.
Yeah. So there's a little comment from Jack down here. We love Jack's stats. They're always so fantastic. Basically, 2/3 of the best women at any race and half of the best men at any given race have been from the age group heat the past couple of seasons. Years? There's a missing word there. Past couple of years, not just from elite. This year, if you look at the top 25 finishers, after combining elite and age group times, 64% of women and 54% of men have been from the age group division. Combining the heats condenses similar ability levels. So I don't want to be super, super positive and just sound like we're saying this is a great idea. We're not listening to anything that could be an issue. But on the whole, it is sounding like a good idea and people are feeling positive. This is probably the bit that people are the most sticky about. This, what happens to my podium? And yeah. I get it. I totally get it. If you're used to kind of getting a podium, maybe some points, maybe some races I could scrape a podium, but I don't deserve it. And if I do, if we put the competition together, yeah, that's great. If I want it, I'm going to have to work harder. But I know it kind of hurts a bit, but I do feel like it's best for the sport overall. I mean, I kind of want to hear from. I was assuming there'd be a bit more criticism on that basis from the athletes. I like I said, I don't want to be super duper positive. I don't want to be overly critical, but it seems like a good idea.
Well, I think me and Chris have had a lot of chat about this, and I have to say that was my concern as well of a fear of what people think, and of like how much would this affect someone's someone's thought of like, oh, should I really be in age group or should I really be in elite, or the reason why we're doing this is to improve your racer experience. Now, if the racer experience is to sort of get up onto that podium, and I think as all those stats kind of come in, is going to be very, very few and far between of like the differences of what we've seen. However, as Kevin keeps saying, your ability to run faster, your ability to kind of move throughout the course more freely is going to improve your experience, and that's really where we are going with this.
Yeah, I would say that the quality of the racing directly contributes to the growth of the sport. More people running better races is what it's all about. As a mid 30-something-year-old that races, like I feel the pain, right? It's hard whether you're trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon or anything else. You just hit in most sports, you hit an age bracket where it's really hard and you've got to work harder, but that's why it's worth working for, right? So, we looked at a lot of data and thought really hard. We certainly don't want to impact anyone's race with the change directly, but I think it's relatively minimal, and I think it'll really help the overall health of the sport.
So is the concern that at a normal season race, there'll be, say, 5 elite athletes that show up, and obviously there's only 3 elite podiums, and so those next 2, if they're running well, will be taking age group podiums?
Basically, yeah, that's kind of the only concern I've heard.
Yeah. Let's rephrase that. Not taking age group podiums, earning age group podiums. And that goes to the point I was trying to make earlier on, is it's going to bring more prestige and more importance and carry more weight for those age group podiums now, because the best racers are going to podium. And if you go out and you get an age group podium now, as great as it's been over the past few years, your third place podium might feel a whole lot better than a first place podium last year, because maybe you had to earn it a little bit more. It's going to carry that much more in here. So I think that the prestige of it makes it better, and anything that you have to work harder for to get is going to feel a whole lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting point, because I'm in that, I'm 42, so that'd be a hard category to get an age group awarding, and that would and as we said, I think the difference between, especially if you look at that category for the men, some of them end up into the overall anyway, like top 5 elite. So I don't think there is a massive difference, but it will really encourage people to feel proud of what that they've earned an age group medal, an age group podium. Awesome.
I just want to quickly say we are getting some questions through on YouTube, and we've had some through on Instagram. They're not necessarily about this change, so I'll throw a few of those to you at the end. So we're not ignoring them, but if people do have questions specifically regarding this, please send them in. We'll ask a few of them at the end, but this isn't a general Spartan Ask Me Anything. However, we'll try and get there. I suppose also it will avoid people sandbagging, which is often a bit of a frustrating issue. It's kind of almost the opposite thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's encouraging people to be the best that they can be. That's exactly that's it. Sandbagging's a little bit harsh on some point, but it's not having people the ability to make a choice. Now they can make a choice. Once they go into the championship races, they can choose to run elite or they can choose to run age group, and I think that's fine. And I think people can have the ability to do that. But it makes it very exciting. I mean, for me, I'll be excited to race.
Yeah. There were some questions about media and media coverage and how it would work, but if this is just happening at general races throughout the seasons and not championships, that's not going to impact that. So that's kind of a non-issue.
Yep.
And is this a change that it's going to stay this way, or is it going to be reviewed and then brought into place on championship events?
So our strategy with it is for those regular season events to, roll out a format that will carry us forever is a long time, but the next 5-10 years, we're really trying to, for championships and competitive heats and all of that, get a really strong structure that's easy to understand, helps us get people into the sport, and just makes the racing more exciting. So to that end, we don't have any plans to, kind of roll up the competitive heats into the championship and series levels events at this time. We think that still works really well, right? Having a clean, simple qualification system for anyone who wants to race pro championship, while still maintaining that, that exciting race vibe you get within the age groups. At that point, you are shoulder to shoulder with the best of your age group in the region or in the country, really gutting it out. And, I think that films best, that, it's the most exciting coverage. It lets you do the gun starts, so very clearly who 1, 2, 3 are across the line. So for the foreseeable future, I would see us sticking with this competitive waves at regular season events, and then pro championship and age group championships at everything above that.
And with everything, new, like there's obviously like sometimes teething problems, and so we are not afraid to make like little tweaks, little like changes, that kind of stuff, to make it smoother, to make this work as well as it can do. And obviously things on paper look a lot different on actually laying it out, but me and Chris are going to keep a real close eye on how this kind of works, how this lays out. And as always, with Nicole and with Ken, and all the athletes, we take a lot of the feedback. We chat a lot to the athletes of all, including all the way down into age group as well, to make sure that we can get this as best as we can. So we would.
I think that's something that's been quite apparent with Spartan in the last couple of years, is the kind of the listening to athletes and also going, yeah, we're not perfect. Yeah, we made a mistake. Let's change this for next time, without the kind of bravado of, nope, this is the way it is, deal with it. And I think that goes a long way in the sport. I mean, it's not always going to be perfect, but just accepting, yeah, this wasn't quite right. And it's good to say that there could be teething problems, because there could be teething problems, but that doesn't mean it's going to be something that's abandoned. It's something that you just clarify and refine. And you've shown, especially this year, that you do listen to athletes, and that's really great. Kevin, I think you had something that you wanted to say.
All right. Well, you reflected a lot. I think what a lot of us are thinking too. We have a lot of gratitude for guys like Chris and Steve specifically coming in and being always so upfront and working really hard behind the scenes to make all this stuff happen. But I did have a specific question about the championship series, and one in particular that we used to have, but we no longer do. And from the community that I've been around all year, and I've probably been to about 20 races this year, was the question of, will there be a Stadion series coming back anytime soon? And if it was possible, if people would want to do it, that I've talked to, even if they weren't getting prize money, just to have the prestige of that Stadion series again. Is there any chance that could possibly come back for 2024? Is that something that you're looking towards more down the road, if you're looking at it at all?
Yeah, so I think I can say it's not likely for 2024. I think the name of the game for next year is this simplification and putting in, the architecture we sort of talked about to help re-educate, get more people into the sport, make it nice and simple and exciting. But it's definitely not off the table for beyond that, right? I think, the logic behind a lot of the series and championships next year is giving opportunities to racers that excel in different areas and moving a little bit away from the this is the one distance, and if you win this, you're the best Spartan racer in the world, because we know the sport's not in that place, right? We see different athletes excelling at the 3K, versus the Beast, versus any of the other formats. And I think Stadion's one of those as well, where it doesn't fit necessarily with, the same athletes in all areas. So it's not something we would rule out. I think we'd think quite hard about how it would fit into the overall architecture of what's going on. But it'd be something we'd be thinking about for, 25 and beyond, less likely for 24.
I'm going to start throwing a few questions out that have been sent in from YouTube and that were sent in earlier. Some of them will be focused towards this. Some of them are slightly broader, like that question, but still within the sport and competitive side, if that's okay. And we'll get a few of those public questions asked. So, racing a national series race, is the pro heat excluded from the age group podiums?
Yes. So once you hit the series and championship level, they're two different races. So you have to qualify into the pro championship, and that'll be a competition unto itself with its own leaderboard, with a mass start, timing by gun time, etc. And then on the age group championship at all of those events, you'll be bracketed with your age group. And again, you'll be getting sent off with the other racers in your age group. But it won't be the one massive leaderboard that you have on the regular season weekends where it's just getting slotted top 3 and then everyone else age group. So separate competitions at the series and championship level.
Okay. Podium 1 to 3 are won by people in my age group. Sounds like a maths question, this. Podium 1 to 3 are won by people in my age group. I finished 37th overall, but 4th in my age group. So will I be awarded a first place in my age group award when I finished 4th in my age group?
I think that question, if I'm hearing it correctly, is whether there's double dipping from your top 3 overall or not. And there is not.
We've had that question again in that same way. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, your top 3 overall finishers that are on the overall podium are excluded from age group awards. So when age group time comes, you take off the top 3 if they happen to be in your age group, and then wherever you stack up below that.
Okay. So even if the top 3 were men 35 to 39 and you're a man 35 to 39, you get your first place in age group. It's just completely separate.
Correct.
Yep.
Not too much different from how it is now. It's just slotted differently.
I've seen an infographic that said 2023 Elite Top 10 and another that said Top 3 will qualify for the 2024 Pro Band. Could you clarify that, please?
Yes. So, and this was one of the areas that we were adapting on the fly as we did the rollout, but we were trying to decide the right number of athletes to grandfather in from this year to next year, because National Series races can start as early as February next year. So naturally, if it's only in season, we won't have many athletes qualified to even race National Series by the time the first event comes along. So what we decided on, because this announcement's coming pretty close to the start of next season, we're going to do top 10 elite podium finishes from within 2023. Will qualify you to race National Series Pro Championship, or top 3 finishes within 2024. So top 10 from 2023 will grandfather you in, and then within next year, it'll be podium overall finishes to get you access to the National Series Pro Championship. That's one, I think, to Steve's point, we're going to be keeping a really close eye on it because there's not roll downs next year. So we want to make sure we're qualifying enough athletes in to make the National Series exciting. So we'll be keeping a close eye on it, but at launch now, top 10 from 23, top 3 within 24.
Okay. Thank you. It's a lot of information, but I think it'll all become incredibly clear. I know from like the way it seems, when you see it written down, it is a lot more simple. It's just going to take a little bit of time for people to kind of wrap their head around it. Because when you know it, but when you don't, it can be a little confusing.
I would absolutely refer everyone to those. I think we have 4 infographics that lay this out much better than I ever could with words.
Somebody's asking, will the change of combining age group and elite heats apply to DECA fit as well?
So we're not at this time applying the changes unilaterally to DECA and trail. There's some differences, within those competitions already. But, as a portfolio company, we're always keeping an eye on something that works in one area and whether that applies elsewhere or whether it's best to keep the 2 products distinct in that regard. So at this time, no changes to DECA, but we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll of course talk with that team as this rolls out across next year.
Okay. One of the last questions we've got, and we have discussed this a fair amount, but I don't want it to seem unfair, like I'm not asking the question directly from someone. The new competitive heat changes seems like an all elite race now, especially for my age group, 30s. Which, if I understood correctly, those prior elite racers, not top 3, would take the age group podiums. Can you please explain the logic and reasoning behind this and how this is deemed more fair? I think I may be misunderstanding something. We have discussed it, but just to answer this question fairly, let's just quickly recap that, I guess.
Yeah. So I think, as we discussed, that the interpretation is correct, that former elites from years past, or that extend beyond the top 3 overall podium, will then take age group slots. Some age groups will be very, very competitive, and so it's potential a podium that you would have gotten in your age group this year, you may get bumped next year. However, I think we've tossed out a bunch of the stats that Jack has pulled. It's not the massive bleed through, or it doesn't suddenly become an elite only race. It's just not the nature of the athletes we have in the sport right now, and the way that those competitions are operating. So of course everyone stands to get bumped around if they're someone runs a faster race, but it's not a huge landslide change to who will be on the age group podiums.
I think this is a line I trot out a lot, but I think it's very valid. This is a baby sport. There's a lot of working out still to do to find out what's right. And using that line, this is not where our athletes are who are currently in the sport. Adapting to the athletes now and saying, does this work? It's not a bad thing. Rather than just going, this is the way it works, and we'll all fit in with it. But also, I'm going to throw in a slightly controversial topic, talking about bleeding out. Barbed wire. We spoke about that last time, Chris, and people are still not over the moon about the inclusion of it in races. Are we going to start seeing less of it in competitive races?
So, start out by saying, obviously, we look at safety all the time, and not just on barbed wire, but on all the obstacles, what the fall protection looks like, the whole thing, how people are utilizing it, in person. Now, barbed wire, of course, classic OCR. We use it in pretty much all of our brands. It's always been around, and at this time we're not looking at taking it off the course. I think the way we look at it from a product perspective is you're never meant to touch that barbed wire. You're not. The reason that's on course, the reason it's an obstacle, is to make sure you stay down and you take your time and you get through it safely. So although we want to watch the way athletes interact with it, it's a fine line for us between removing it so that people can get, right up and, bear crawl through as fast as they can and just push the wire out of the way. And it maintaining its purpose on the course. So we'll always look at it. We're totally open to feedback. We want to hear when there's health concerns, and, we look at the end of every event at any sort of medical trends, what's going on after the race. And at this time, it doesn't feel like an urgent thing to move for the hit to the product experience, but always open to having the debate. And if we ever feel like it is crossing a line, it would be a no-brainer for us to make a change. But I know there's probably
it's definitely been a new request recently. In the sort of 11 years of working with Spartan, I've never heard it, and I have been cut a lot by barbed wire. I've got some good marks on my back as well, and I know it's very rare, and it's only kind of come up recently. I have not been approached personally. I got approached with a lot of stuff, a lot of other big topics in Spartan. But I've seen bits and bobs of this online from a few individuals. Now, it is a concern, and it's definitely come up this year, probably because of the fact that the 3K has been rolled out, and it's a more vigorous event. You're going faster under this, and I kind of understand that style of it. So me and Chris have definitely talked about this, inclusion, especially in the 3K. And also we've seen, the problems with, like, obviously hair, and especially in the women's side, hair getting caught in barbed wire, and, do we really need this? So it's definitely a topic of conversation that we will include athletes in, and I'd love to get Nicole's kind of feedback on this as well. But yeah, it's definitely on our list for discussion for the inclusion in especially that 3K faster sports. But Nicole, what are your kind of comments from racing for many years with barbed wire?
Yeah. So I will say I'm a smaller athlete, and so this is not a huge concern of mine personally. I don't have massive scars on my back from barbed wire. I get snagged every time. I get like little scrapes here and there, but again, it is easier for me to go under, to roll, to squat down. It just is. So from what I've heard, what I've seen, the biggest complaints are coming on the men's side, which totally makes sense. They're bigger individuals, and the scars that they do have are horrible. They have, like Ian and Ryan and other Ryan and I don't even remember who else has said something, but they have big scars and they get really torn up. I do think that it's become a more vocalized topic because of the 3K, because they're going under barbed wire many times. It's not just once in a beast, for instance. It's, in 2 rounds plus 3 rounds in the final. And so they're encountering it more, right? And then again, during the 3K, you're going much faster. So again, you're just possibly not being as cautious about the wire. So I do think that moving away from the 3K a bit will in part solve the issue, but I still think it's something that I would encourage you all to, talk to those men in particular, just because they're the ones that are experiencing this, not as much the women. And I think it is an issue because they get cut up and then they go into like the dunk wall or other bodies of water that are dirty, and then you have a heightened risk of infection. And those are things that you wouldn't see at the very end in medical at the race. Those are things that the athletes are going to be dealing with days or weeks later. So you're not going to actually see that data live on site. So that's my 2 cents.
To expand upon that, one of the men, a lot of this was stemming from obviously the 3K event in Pennsylvania, where ironically enough, the barbed wire was about as high as I've ever seen it because of the trenches. And one of the men, because I was right there, of course, watching, that got ripped up the most was Logan Broadbent, who's smaller than I am. And I'm only 5'5", right? And he's a little guy. And basically what it comes down to is personal responsibility. If you're reckless and if you're out of control, you're going to get caught and it's going to hurt. So they have to race with more control. If you're a bigger guy, right, you're going to have to expend more energy to get lower and make the choice not to get hit by that barbed wire. And that kind of levels the playing field for some of the smaller athletes so you could go through. That's one of those events where when you have someone who's a bigger guy, well, you know what? The smaller guys can't complain about the heavy carries and that it's, double their body weight sometimes or a third of their body weight. But the bigger athlete gets the advantage of that. These smaller athletes are some of the few that get the advantage in that barbed wire. And even if you're smaller, if you're going through irresponsibly, too fast, reckless, or outside of your ability, if you get cut, that's your own fault. Because that 3K event in Pennsylvania, again, was some of the highest barbed wire I've ever seen. And the guys that were getting cut up by that were people that were just going through with reckless abandon, and they took that more upon themselves. So I think the athletes have to take a little personal responsibility there. And also some of the bigger athletes have to realize that some of the things that are on course, like the bucket, in the past, the log carry, and of course, like a double sandbag, are going to favor them more than the smaller athletes that now gain somewhat of an advantage in that lower barbed wire.
I still have to say that I disagree. As a smaller athlete that is possibly at a disadvantage on the heavy carries, I would still prefer to see athletes not have to make that call between, do I get cut up and go faster, or do I go lower and take more time? And some of the barbed wire that I have seen at races is incredibly low. When I'm going under it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how is anybody bigger than me supposed to fit under this? So I wasn't in Pennsylvania. I don't know about that, but in other races I've been to, including OCRWC recently, the second and third day barbed wire was very, very low.
Yeah,
So
we
I
had
think-
some bad cuts from that, and from my opinion, I don't like it. I don't like seeing those cuts. I don't think it's necessarily a part of the sport. I get it for open wave athletes; it's really good fun, but I personally don't want to see anyone coming away from one of my races bleeding unnecessarily. Kevin, your comment is quite dramatic and strong, and I appreciate some of it, because I certainly know a lot of the smaller male athletes and smaller female athletes who are never allowed to complain about anything, like Kirk Hoist being so heavy sometimes and people not being able to do it. Maybe the focus there is let's not cut people up, but let's focus more on how we balance things for different sized athletes, because we've not yet decided on what is the perfect size athlete for OCR. And yeah, is there a way that we can disadvantage the larger athletes so that the smaller ones have a chance to catch up, and vice versa?
Yeah, and again, my
I
argument wasn't a case to.
Steve,
I'm sorry.
sorry, what you going to say?
My argument wasn't to make hey, things need to be more balanced. Part of my argument is it's great that things aren't balanced, because you're never going to have something that's in perfect balance. So why try to go there? I love the diversity of having all these different extreme things. But at the same time, I mean, it really comes down to a lot of it's your personal responsibility. If some people can get through the barbed wire quickly, but they're exuding more energy and they're not just running through as fast as they can, or rolling through, or charging through, where they're going to get themselves hurt, a lot of that's their own fault. So I think some of the people that got cut up real bad have to kind of look in the mirror first before they start pointing the finger at Spartan race or any other series. And to Nicole's point, I was in an OCRWC, so I can't attest to how low the barbed wire was there. And some of them are much lower than others. Obviously, the disparity. We've never had a standardized height for barbed wire. Maybe that's something you could look into. But I think a lot of it does come down to personal responsibility first.
And I think it's a
Steve,
two-way
what were you going to
street.
say there?
Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, Chris.
I can let Chris talk to this as well, but I think one thing that is important is that the athletes have been heard, and our next step is to discuss, and that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's
So
I was going to say, I think it's important for it to be a two-way street, right? We need to make sure we're building to a spec that people feel good about, that we're listening to the feedback, that we're being responsible as a race organizer. And I think to Kevin's point, I agree with quite a bit of it. We also need to do a better job of educating racers on things to watch out for and taking care of themselves out there. We can't have people pitching themselves off the top of walls because it's faster either, right? There's degrees of risk involved with racing, and the safest thing is for us to have no obstacles. So working back from that, there's an education piece for us to, and have an open conversation about how far we're willing to adjust to make sure that it's approachable and safe, and then making sure racers know that you can't do everything for the sake of speed. You need to plan your race and race smart as well.
I like to see everything from different sides, having worked on both sides. And I think what an important conversation is it's incredibly important to hear what the athletes have to say, because they are the ones who are doing it. But there is so much that happens behind the scenes that athletes have got no idea. I mean, the dunk wall at OCRWC was one. The anger and the vitriol that was directed towards Garfield because he wanted to put a dunk wall in, not knowing that there are all these things in place to make sure it's actually going to be incredibly safe for everyone. And you don't need to see the amount of data and paperwork he's going to do to make sure it's okay. You just need to have a bit of trust as well. So it's a balance from both sides, kind of, yes, let's hear what people have to say to improve the experience for everyone, but yes, also do trust in the people who are putting on the event, that maybe they might know what they're doing a little bit. A few more things. I will finish up soon because we've been going quite a while, and obviously we did start a bit late, so I've kept you all a bit longer than ideal, but there were kind of two things that came up within that conversation that, again, I'm afraid nothing to do with this championship, but people just want to know. First is the 3K series. What's happening with it next year?
Yeah, so when we were looking at next year with the 3K, we were trying to find the best way for it to fit in. We felt pretty strongly with the core championship series that a sprint, a super, and a beast were strong formats for us to go out with, especially because we'll be combining, the same event weekends. We'll have your pro championship and your age group, and to be racing the same distances, I think, is strong. with that said, we know the 3K has a ton of format. This was a ton of promise. This year was really exciting with that. So we are planning on having 3Ks for the pro championship level at the regional championships alongside a longer format, the regional championship event. And then we're in the works right now for a world championship event at the end of the year where that will also feature. So more details to come. Instead of doing it as regional championship series for next year, we felt the right balance with the other changes we're making was to keep it at the regional level and above. But we're looking to increase participation in that format and then generating an even longer term strategy. So I wouldn't say 3K series are out forever, but right now, regional championship and world championships for next year for it.
Cool. And one more question, which I'm really sorry I have to ask. It's the question we knew was going to come up, which is about paying athletes.
Yeah, of course. And so, what I'll say, I know Joe put out a message on this a couple of weeks ago, and there's not a ton I can expand on beyond that. But what I can say, paying athletes is really important to us. Steve and I in particular we hear about it a lot, and we really want to do right by our athletes. So what Joe mentioned in his post, we're in the post-COVID world, and we're trying to balance not putting the brakes on the sport itself and making sure that we're continuing to generate great events, getting athletes out, growing the sport, while also doing right by the racers. So it's a top priority. We've got a plan in place sort of behind the scenes for it. We appreciate everyone's patience, and we understand 100% why the question comes up so often. It's really important, and we're not where we want to be with it. But it matters a lot to us, and we're doing everything we can to get it sorted.
I know along that vein, is there anything that can be said about prize money for next year or plans for that? And I know one concern about the fact that prize money has not been paid specifically is raises the question of why are other events being put on that promise prize money? I don't know if you can speak to that in particular.
Yeah, so it's a careful balance, right? We intentionally didn't mention anything about prize money with this championship announcement because we want to be cognizant of the overarching situation. But there is prize money in the plan for next year. That's also important for the sport. This is being behind on prizing isn't a forever situation, right? We will be caught up on this, and it's not a question of if, it's certainly a question of when, and that's where we're working on the plans. Early November, we'll be announcing prize money for next year, what it is at each level, and we think it's a serviceable plan that will do right, offering an opportunity for top racers to earn a respectable amount of money within the year with us in a way that's exciting, pushes people to achieve. But we didn't want to focus too much on that right now. We want to get the announcement out about what racing next year looks like. And then once we're in a better spot, we're on our front foot, come out with the rest of those details.
Cool. One more question that's come in just about the championships, and then we'll finish up. I haven't seen it addressed anywhere specifically. Will men and women be mixed together in their competitive waves based on expected times?
Yes, the answer for regular season weekends when we're racing that competitive heat structure, male and female will race together. They'll be selecting their pace group out of the same set of paces, and they'll start alongside anyone running their pace.
Fantastic. So unless there are any further comments, Steve, is there anything you'd like to ask or throw in there? Have we lost him? I just thought he was staring wistfully into the distance, but I think he's frozen.
No,
Oh no!
There he is.
I have poor reception right now, actually.
Okay. We'll take that as a poor reception and can't throw anything. Nicole, Kevin, anything else from the athlete point of view, from what you've heard out there, that you'd like to have a say on before we close this off?
For me, on behalf of the athletes, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks. I think in general, it's the changes that we've heard about are going to be really positive. They simplify things. They make it easier to get into the sport, to make an impact early on. And I think it'll create really great environment for athletes from elite and age group to mingle a little bit more, to really get to see each other race in person. And so I think it's going to create just a really great camaraderie. And then as far as everything else, Chris, I appreciate you touching on the prize money and addressing that. That's a primary concern for a lot of athletes. But a bunch of us really enjoy the sport and want to stick with it and keep showing up to races. And are excited about the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the future is really bright. When we ever have these incredible changes within the format that look towards the future, but also kind of now honoring the past and bringing those together, I think it's a great thing. And another great thing that's been going on from the races I've seen this year is just a shout out to all the Spartan staff that's in, the merch tent, that's at registration, that is on the build crew. A lot of them, because of layoff due to financial problems in the company, a lot of people lost their jobs, and there's a lot of people that are working a lot of overtime hours for not a whole lot of pay, that are grinding it out at every single one of those courses to make sure that athletes like myself and Nicole get to have these races to go to and still have that incredible experience. So there's a lot of other people out there that are hurting too, and it's important to honor all of them because they don't necessarily have the social platforms that we have, and you won't really hear any complaints from them because they're just out there grinding. So big shout out to that Spartan staff out there that's doing all the work to make this happen for us.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out to the Spartan staff as well. It was my first time working with them at OCRWC when we had the production team and the build crew, and they were incredible. They were fantastic. They put on a great event and absolutely pulled it out of the bag despite having to do something completely different, and it was so impressive. So I'm happy. It's all good. I mean, Chris, unexpectedly, this has gone down without many hitches. Very unusually in the world of OCR does a piece of news go down so well. So I was personally thrilled when I heard it. It sounds like athletes are quite happy. A few small concerns, but nothing major. So well done. This is a great kind of a positive look forward for the future of the sport and what you're doing within the sport to progress it and take it to where it really can be, and we know it can be. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. I'm so happy it's well received, and we're of course looking forward to next year. We think it's going to be a great year for the sport.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks everyone so much for joining us, and everyone for watching and sending your questions in. It's been a lot of fun, and it's so great to get to answer these questions. So thank you, Chris, thank you, Nicole, and Kevin, and Steve, obviously, who left due to bad signal. It's been a lovely chat and really great to get those questions answered. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Adios.